Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. Gridiron 360. Bill and Dave. Papa. It's Gridiron 360 on the mic. It's Bill. It's Dave. We're going to talk a little Week 13 recap in college football.
It's drawing to a close.
It is drawing to a close. But still, even down to these last weeks, we've seen some shiggity shake-ups.
Yep.
It's been a fun season. I am sad that it'll be going, and even though hopefully the Tigers finish out and we do make it to the playoff, there's still that month lull. Oh man, it is a grind. I got to be honest, it's a grind.
Well, Florida State will be playing in the middle of December, so it won't be quite so long.
Hey, at least you're going to be playing. It'll be cool, man.
True.
It'd be cool,
I'd rather have a coach at this point than anything
how do you
else.
feel about Odell?
You know, I like Odell. I think
we have had conversation about him, not in depth, but I think you've given more maybe to most listeners than they would find anywhere else. I'll be honest with you, especially where we're at about who this guy is. And
yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing: is he's survived 3 coaching staffs in that sense. Now, granted, the one was a handoff, so that's nice. But even, Fisher leaving, he was a defensive tackle for us in the early 90s, might have been the late 80s. It was right around that era, the end of the Dion era, I think, is when he came in. So this guy is all Florida State. He's coached our D tackles. If you look around the league over the last 15, 20 years, we put some pretty serious meat in the middle of the defense over that time. He's a good coach, understands the Florida State culture, has kind of been the flag bearer of that, even as, obviously learning from Bowden, both on the field as a player, but then learning from him as a coach for several years, and then in turn kind of moving on and kind of he kept that Florida State tradition with Jimbo, kept it with Willie Taggart. If you remember in that, what did he coach? I think 2 games, I believe he coached. He coached the bowl game and then the Florida game after Fisher left as the head coach. Here's the challenge with him. I'll start with the challenge. He doesn't have a coaching tree or a history of coaches outside of Florida State from which to draw from. He would definitely fit the bill, which I do like, of a coach that would be more of a I don't want to say a CEO. That's that old school Bobby mentality, but more of like a head coach that's a head coach and not getting into the coordination, not in any way, not slanting too heavily towards one side of the ball. But then again, they are going to need serious coordinators. Now, here's the thing, though. This is the thing about it. And I don't know, it's more comforting in the short term, but might be dangerous in the long term, is he could keep Kendall Briles. And I will say I've seen something out of this offense since Taggart left. Leaves me with some questions as to what was going on. It seemed like he was playing the offense very differently than when he was under Taggart.
49-12 this past weekend over, I know it was Alabama State, but let's be honest, that's good. I mean, that shows something.
Yeah.
It's not like you beat them. I mean, like you put it on them, like you should, like a team like you should.
Beat up Boston College.
Like even if a team like us, you could see 49-12 with us playing Alabama State.
Yeah. I think
that's good.
This is the simple fact is I think.
What about this week? Well, we'll talk about it. I like what's going on this weekend.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm not anti. Here's the thing: is the struggle for Florida State as a university is they cannot miss on this hire. The Taggart hire was a bad miss. It might cost you 3-4 years of poor play. A miss on this one could be 10+ years. It speaks that ugly. You can't redo it. The problem too is we went 2 years. Our biggest challenge, and then I'll kind of hold my piece here. The biggest challenge we've had is Taggart missed on quarterbacks for 2 straight years. If we blow up this, we only have one quarterback that is committed at this point, and all commitments are really not commitments when you don't have a coach. And so if we go a third year without a quarterback, I mean, we're in trouble. Deep trouble. deep trouble. So that's going to be the question: is does Odell offer a little bit more of continuity where they can keep the recruiting class together, but in the long term, is he really the coach? We all hope and pray.
Travis kid, is I heard you talk about he's sticking around, I guess, but is he not? He seems to be a good fit.
He fits a little bit better. What I understand, and they haven't really given him a shot with this. Like, Bryles needs a running quarterback. He just does. Like, that's his MO.
And that's what this kid is, right?
He's a runner, but understand that I guess his thing is also not only running, but also going deep. It's like kind of like a mixture of both. And I don't know that this kid's got the arm to do it. We'll see. He's done really good with the timing on it, but if we miss on another quarterback, I mean, what college football team can survive going 3 years without recruiting a quarterback? At all. Not just a crappy one, but at all.
Well, maybe the transfer pool.
So here's where we're at. I don't know. They've kept their mouth shut on this, so we'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, let's dive right in, and we're not going to waste any time. We're going to go right to the big end of the day. The first, I guess, big matchup against a solid opponent. I mean, Wisconsin, I guess, was that, but I don't know exactly how good they are. We'll find out more this weekend with them against Minnesota. But the Ohio State Buckeyes welcome the Penn State Nittany Lions into the horseshoe. Nooner, big time.
Yep.
Big time. Ohio State goes into this thing at the number 2 ranking only due to the fact that they haven't gone through the schedule that LSU has. Now, obviously, chinks in the armor that we'll talk about with LSU like we did last week defensively. But Ohio State, this is basically all the marbles for Penn State now.
Yeah.
Ohio State going into, and Penn State was what, 8? Something like that?
Yep.
Ohio State goes into this game, let's just say it's halftime, it's 14-0 Buckeyes. And to be honest with you, I thought it could have been a lot more. It looked they were in massive control of this game.
They were running it well. Let's just put it like it is. They were running it well.
Now, the fact that they only did score a touchdown in each quarter does tell me a little bit of something. I mean, they were controlling the game, and their game plan was to keep the ball on the ground for the most part. But we've seen Ohio State against these lesser opponents have 21 points in each the first and second quarter. So the fact, and I think Penn State's defense is good. But
I think the difference, what I saw, and understand, Penn State comes in with the number 4 rushing defense in the country, but it's seeing a team, I mean, they're men at every position. They're the size difference.
J.K. Dobbins
and
goes 36
talent
for a $157, 2 TDs on the ground.
Yeah.
He was just a beast. But that's what their plan was. I mean, Fields was 16 of 22, no picks, 2 TDs, but only had 188 yards. So that was the plan. He did have 68 yards on the ground, but that was on 21 carries. I got to be honest, you can't keep doing that. Not as this is, it's going to get, more and more down, it's going to get harder and harder.
Yep.
But we'll see. So 14-0 at half. And then they come out of half, and Ohio State proceeds to put another touchdown on the board. Now it's 21-0. And it was, I thought the game was over. I was a little disappointed that it was not more of a competitive game. Sean Clifford goes out with an apparent groin injury, something of that nature. The starting quarterback for Penn State. In comes the backup, Will Levis, number 7.
Yep.
And there seemed to be a little bit of a spark. Now, understand, Levis isn't like Clifford or McSorley in the set. He's much bigger, first of all, than those guys. But he is more of the running quarterback than those guys, in the sense that they're drawn-up run plays where it's a read option and he's taking them. And he's a big, powerful dude. Like those other guys that might do it, they would use their quicks, their vision, their small size and escapability when they're running the ball. This guy is just pound. And all of a sudden there's this little spark that seemed to, kindle.
Yep.
Little spark kindling. And the fire began to grow because Penn State marches down the field, and then after a great run from Journey Brown, it was Journey that broke that one from like the 20, wasn't it? It wasn't Noah Kane. No, it was Journey.
No.
It was Journey.
It was Journey. Yep.
Number 4, Journey Brown, running back for Penn State, just determined, would not be denied scores. Kickoff to Ohio State. Ohio State proceeds to put the ball on the ground. I think that was Fields, the first and second time. Penn State recovers, goes down, scores again behind this Levis guy.
Yep. 21-14 at this point.
Yep. And then Penn State proceeds to get the ball back. I think that was another fumble, if I'm not mistaken, by Fields, who he came up, it looked like his wrist or something.
Yeah, started grabbing his hand.
And Penn State drives down the field, and they're in the red zone, even within 10 maybe, and they can't get it in. And they resort to a field goal.
Yeah, that was probably halftime was the turning point from Penn State.
I give credit to Franklin for having these guys, making adjustments and having his staff and having these guys ready to come out of half to play.
Especially after you come in the first half, come back out of the second half, you get scored on. I mean, really, it was Ohio State should have had a much bigger lead at halftime, just the way they were playing. And Penn State just found something in them, and they punched them back in the mouth. And, Ohio State was reeling there at a point. I think, to me, what changed the game right after that was that field goal. They had to get that touchdown.
I agree.
And that hurt them because Ohio State just has too many weapons to not get nose-to-nose with them.
But they went, they did what they planned on from the get-go, which was the run game. Because I got to be honest, they get that many yards. KJ Hill was the leading receiver with 4 receptions, 46 and a TD. Olave had 2 for 44 and a TD, but I'll give credit to the secondary for Penn State. They kept them covered pretty good because right after the field goal, they go into the fourth quarter. Justin Fields throws a deep ball. It was a good ball, but it was an even better catch in the end zone. It was great coverage by Penn State, and Olave catches this ball, right at the front corner, falling before going out of bounds, falling backwards to answer. And that's why that field goal, if they had tied it up, then could have been a whole different complexion, even if Ohio State had scored, on the next drive. But that field goal didn't get it tied up, and they answered with 7 right away, even though they hadn't done much that entire half. And, that was pretty much the end of the story. I think they turned them over late. But I give credit. They kept fighting. That's a tough place to play, the Horseshoe. It was the biggest game of the year. And on the flip side, I give credit to Ohio State. They did what they had to do. They didn't they didn't blow them out, but I don't think they needed to. This is a good team, or at least in the committee's eyes. And so why don't you talk a little bit about the homecoming, so to speak?
The homecoming?
Yes. Who got to come home in this game? Or, I don't know, the return of the Jedi.
Coming home?
Chase Young? Hello.
Oh, because that's where he's from. Oh, yeah, okay. All right.
I was good. No, just the fact that he was on suspension.
Oh, yeah,
he
got
to come back this game.
Okay. Well, actually, this was really 2 guys, but the most prolific. And I guess before I get into him, Baron Browning, their junior linebacker, he was all over the place too. So it wasn't like it was just one guy out there dominating. I mean, it was a meeting at the quarterback in the first half in particular, pretty much any time they drop back to pass. But just to give you an idea of how this guy was the second best defensive player out on the field. He had 7 tackles, 6 solos, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack and a half. And he's the second best defender, and it's not even close. Chase Young, I give the kid credit. He didn't whine, bitch, and moan about what happened with him. He owned it. He didn't come back and start saying, I'm going to kill people and this and that. The kid's just very focused. Comes in, 9 tackles, 6 solo, 3 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. And I'm sure he's responsible for at least 4 of the 6 skid marks in the Penn State quarterback's pants because he was on this guy. I mean, I'm sorry. I missed it. Did I forget the 2 forced fumbles? Forgot about those too. Like this, he is a one-man wrecking crew. I have to be honest with you. There are teams out there that are going to need a quarterback, but it's going to be tough passing up on this kid because
hey, we're in the business right now after losing to Chicago. My New York Giants, we need it. They're talking about, well, we could trade back or get a lineman. No. We're number 2 right now. Well, Cincinnati's number 1. They're gonna have to take Burrow or a quarterback. Man, they need it.
Yeah,
we're in the Chase Young business.
Here's the kind of thing we talk about. This you pay 4 positions. You pay left tackles. You pay quarterbacks on offense. You pay DNs and corners on defense. If you're to ask me, and I'm sitting up there at 1, 2, 3, wherever this guy is insanely may fall to beyond 1, what's a more sure shot, a quarterback or a defensive end? Now, who changes your game more? So there's always that argument. But this is, I'm trying to think of a guy that came out in the draft that was more surefire. I mean, this guy's miles, no pun intended, beyond Garrett, and he was, he was the numero uno, was he not?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think back of a defensive player that I've seen just dismantling teams. And I mean, he's prototypical. He can play 4-3. He could play 3-4 if you wanted him to. He can play it all. And he just destroys games. He did it in this game. I have to say, like, without him, I got to tell you, Penn State might have won this game without him. I mean, I just don't know.
There's a good possibility. He was heavily involved. And, here's the thing. Like, I'm not saying every single play can you afford to give up, an extra person to block them, but at least to chip it. They kept, they were, Herb Street and Fowler were calling the game, and they're like, especially in the third. No, were they yet? No, they weren't. No, I don't think they were.
No, this was on Fox.
This is, yeah. But regardless, the guys calling the game, especially on 3rd and long, we're like, you can't. No, they're definitely not going to just block him with that one guy. You can't do that. And
you're either running away from him or you're blocking with one guy
around him. I mean, it's like, at least throw a chip or you have to double team him at points in the game. There was some good game planning to run it at him, like inside of him, and just let him run around. And then, especially when the Levis kid came in, those read options were based solely on what he was doing, and that was neutralizing him a little bit. But he was still heavily involved. And when he wasn't making the tackle, he was clogging up and causing so much havoc that they could only go one place only, and the rest of the defense funneled right to that place. So, final score 28-17. The Buckeyes are 11-0. Penn State's 9-2. Good season. Hopefully they'll win out. They'll probably have a New Year's Six bowl, but they're that was their only shot because now being on the same side.
Well, I mean, give it to them. The Penn State's lost to the 2 teams that are going to go play for the title potentially. Now that's still up for debate, but I mean, you got one loss between the 2 teams that they lost to. So that was the big one.
That was the big one. It didn't disappoint.
First half scared you a little bit that it was going to get ugly, but if you stuck around for the second half, it definitely changed the tune.
And here's the last thing I'll say: I almost had weird signs of Tua the week before because the game was pretty much done late in the 4th, and they didn't even need to throw the ball, and Fields rolled out to the left, and he got taken down, and his ankle got just bent sideways. He was clearly limping, so we'll see if there's any. Because those things usually, he may be the adrenaline may have him up and be able to get off the field, and he was limping. But then, like after the game, once that swelling kicks in, we'll see what happens.
Sure,
they have Michigan. And Michigan's on a little bit of a tear themselves. So where are we going to next, Dave?
Well, speaking of the title game here, one side note we'll put on this is, though not, I don't believe. Well, they should be in the top 10, right? Where's Wisconsin at? They're 12. They're 12. Yeah. They beat just a little side note. They beat Purdue. This is a 2-loss Wisconsin team, but this what brings us back to the other team. on the west side here is Minnesota taking on Northwestern. Minnesota obviously coming back from a tough.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
tough
but we
loss.
Know, yeah, going to Kinnick is hard. Playing Iowa there.
Yeah, and
they
they had the
trying to
dream
kill us.
season and all that was going on. So Minnesota goes and plays Northwestern, who has really been
Of disappointment.
Yeah. I mean,
they come off of winning the West last year. Hunter Johnson sat for his transfer year. He was a big-time recruit that came to Clemson, didn't get his time, went up there, and now he sat for a year because of the transfer, but also got to learn the system. And here he's got his first year, and they've just been a disappointment. And mind you, Tanner Morgan, the Minnesota quarterback, remember, he got knocked out of the game last week, apparently went through concussion protocol and was able to start this week.
Yeah, so, for Northwestern, the starter was Andrew Marty. You're talking about Morgan for the Gophers. Sorry,
Yes.
I thought you kind of went from the Northwestern to Minnesota quickly.
No. I was just talking about how the fact that they had a guy like Hunter Johnson, and he with his transfer from Clemson, he was a big recruit, didn't get his time, Obviously, we got some good quarterbacks. He goes up to Northwestern.
Yep.
He didn't play his first year. That whole transfer portal thing really hadn't shaken out when he made his move. So he sits the first year. But that year, he got to sit and learn and know the system. So, I think and them coming off of a year where they won the West, I think there was a lot of high hopes. Pat Fitzgerald's a good coach.
Yeah, they don't have it. Their quarterback situation in this game, still not great. And what it tells me something about how they feel about their quarterbacks in this game, given that they were, obviously they lost. The score was 38-22. They only threw the ball still 12 times in this game. They ran the ball quite a bit, but to no real. I mean, their longest run's 13 yards. Nobody really ran. The top three running backs didn't run for over 3.6 yards a carry. So they amazingly were still able to stay in it. I will say Minnesota ran the ball really well in this game. Everybody averaged over 5 yards a carry with the exception of Morgan on 3 scrambles. You had Ibrahim had 13 carries for 76 yards, 5.8 yards per carry. Brooks, he had 1 huge run for a touchdown. You had Rodney Smith. He was the lead back with 15 carries and 77 yards. So they were able to move the ball down the field. But I guess when they got in close, they put it in the hands of Morgan because he went 15-23 for only 211 yards, but threw for 4 touchdowns. So, again, I guess the simple answer to this is Minnesota rebounded. This was a week either you were playing somebody big, which was very few of those games, Penn State, Ohio State being one of them, or you needed to hold serve. And Minnesota certainly did that. Sets up that huge matchup. It is going to be for the Big Ten West.
Mm-hmm.
It's winning, you're in.
Yep.
Wisconsin and Minnesota go next week, so we'll have more on the preview there.
Is that the Axe game? That might be
the Paul Bunyan.
The Paul Bunyan Axe. All right, exciting stuff coming out of the Big Ten ski. We're gonna bounce over to the SEC and the LSU Tigers. Traveling down to Arkansas, take on the Razorbacks,
who are a dumpster fire.
Yep. Coach Chad Morris was fired from Arkansas. They have an interim coach that's taken over. LSU has given up some points on defense. I think they heard a little bit of those cries this week.
Yep.
They did a better job for the most part. I mean, I know they let Arkansas, and Arkansas is not very good, but they let them put 20 on them. But there did seem to be a little bit when they had the Jefferson kid in at quarterback for Arkansas. They were able to put some drives together. But let's be honest, they scored 14 in the fourth quarter, so it was backup time, rest time. Your Heisman winner, Joe Burrow, 23 of 28, 327, 3 TDs. I mean, you can't really ask much more in a game like this. Get him in, get him out, does his thing. 56-20 is LSU. They go to 11-0.
Well, let me just stop, though, and just want to say one thing.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
The CEH. Oh, my God.
E to the -H.
Yeah, 6 for 188 and 3 scores.
Yeah,
He had an 89-yard long run, but still had 100 yards left to get on 5 carries and a couple more scores. This guy is getting overshadowed by what Joe Burrow is doing, but make no mistake, he's the guy you're going to get real interested in when it's playoff time.
He's going to be needed. They're going to need
Big
to
time.
be able to have him turn it on like this. If there is an issue with their defense, which it looks like they did a little better here.
Yeah,
but
it's still 20 points to Arkansas.
Yeah, I mean, if there is an issue with their defense, they really need to have Edwards-Helaire be able to run the ball so they could, control games if it gets, out of their control, so to speak.
Yep.
But LSU does have one this weekend with Texas A&M, who we will talk about in just a minute, but I don't anticipate them losing. And, I know there's Georgia's defense, who we'll also talk about, is still doing great, but their offense, I love Fromm, but under 50% passing is not going to get it done. They don't have the explosiveness. I don't know. Even if LSU gets shut down a few times offensively, I don't know how they can't put 21, 28 on Georgia easily, just with how high-powered that offense is, and I don't see how Georgia can do that offensively. It's a concern. I thought it might be a better game, the SEC championship. It may not.
All right,
We'll
interesting.
have to see.
Interesting. That's interesting.
I kind of hope Georgia gets it going, gets it in gear. Let's bounce to the next SEC game.
This is a little bit ho-hum as far as a game is concerned. Obviously, the big news is how does Alabama rebound against any opponent for that matter with the loss of Tua. It was good to see Tua on the sidelines. He was able to make it out there.
Worse than he did playing the ukulele in the hospital bed.
Yeah, well, they got to keep that bandage on that nose thing.
And
But I mean, listen, Alabama rolled. It was what West. I don't even know what it is. Western Carolina,
Yeah,
right?
the Catamounts.
Yeah, Western Carolina. The thing I like, but it's hard to tell. They took a lot of guys out. They were limited on some of their carries. They were limited on their passing. Mac Jones was 10 to 12, 275 yards. But I will tell you, I don't know if you saw it. It was Smith. I think it was the one who caught it. Devontae Smith. I think it was him. There was one play where he threw a screen pass behind the line of scrimmage. He ran into a group of 4 defenders. And literally the angles they all took, he was so much friggin' faster than them. He ran right through them. It looked like if it was a normal college team, he would have been gang tackled by 4 guys. So there was some yardage given for the fact that they couldn't handle the athletes for Alabama. But as we get down to this, some things happen this week that are gonna maybe open the door for a one-loss team that's not a conference winner.
Yeah,
so how Alabama finishes and they've got a huge
if
one.
What I said about the SEC championship happens, man. I mean, if
Yep.
if Georgia wins, it's a whole different ball of wax. But if Georgia goes on and they lose to LSU, then that really opens the door for the Tide.
Yep. Yeah. So again, they held serve, looked effective. Again, weak opponent, but we're going to find out a lot about Alabama sans Tua this weekend as they take on Auburn.
Yep, we sure will. Let's hit the last game for the SEC, and that is really the last game the Dogs have in my mind before the SEC championship in Atlanta versus LSU, and that's the Texas A&M Aggies coming in at 7-3 to take on the 9-1 Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia ranked at 4 going into this thing in the college football playoff. A&M ranked early in the season, not ranked now, but let's be honest. They've lost 4 games this year. Yep. One of them's to Georgia. One of them's to LSU, or one of them's to Alabama. One of them's to Clemson, and then the last one was to Auburn. That's 4 good teams, and 2 of those 4 were number 1 when they played them, and they're about to play number 1 this weekend.
Right.
So that's a pretty rough schedule. I don't think that they're going to be able to overcome LSU. Where is that game? It's in Death Valley. Yeah, I don't think they'll be able to overcome that game. It's a night game too, but I do believe they'll be able to put points on them.
Yeah, well, I think everybody's kind of proven you can put points on LSU.
So let's talk about Texas A&M Georgia.
All right, I'm gonna let me lead this one off a little bit, and then I want to bounce this off you. Georgia has problems on offense. I think I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
But I watched two things in this game blew me away with Georgia. One, just watching their rush defense and how insane they are. I mean, their defense in general is very good, but their rush defense in particular is just unbelievable. It just they're going to make LSU, because they're locked in now to play LSU as they won this game 19-13. They're going to make LSU work for it. So now whether they could beat them with the passing game, that's where I think this game could get out of hand if the passing game gets going a lot. But I think Georgia is going to be very tough to run on, and I love Edwards-Helaire, but he's good. But this rush defense, the
Good
other
thing they have the Heisman winner at quarterback for LSU.
Yeah, that's huge. But one thing that really impressed me in this game, and I guess I just haven't watched him well enough because I always thought he was really good, is Swift. DeAndre Swift is unbelievable. I watched two different times, and we've been talking about Najee Harris and the way he was just trucking people in the LSU game in particular. We saw a lot of that. But Swift, two times, had just contact where he just decided to slam the dude. And not even like head down, headshot, like what should be called targeting, but turned sideways and put his shoulder into two guys. I love the way the kid runs. He gets touched a lot. Like he's got to be up there on yards after contact because he is spinning out. Just his moves, everything. This kid's even better than I thought he was. Just the more I watch him, the more I like him. So Georgia's got, like, that's what, honestly, if you're going to go play, even if it was Alabama, but if you're going to go play LSU, you want to play good defense and you got to be able to run the ball. Now, that can't be all you do, though.
Yeah.
So that's kind of tell me what your thoughts were.
Well, I agree. I mean, Swift is awesome, and Harrion did a good job when he came in. He was only 10 for 30, but it was like critical times that he came in and was able to help move the chains. Their line is great, and their defense is swarming. You know, their defensive coordinator, Dan Lanning, who got the job, he was with Mel Tucker as a linebackers coach years ago and then spent the last 2 years as the inside linebackers coach at Memphis. You can see that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, you can see that. The defense swarming on the runs like that. I mean, like, it just, everybody's there. And that's all commanded through not just a great defensive line, but the whole front, because those linebackers are good. And that's what Georgia, I mean, Roquan Smith.
Yep.
I mean, they're good producing linebackers. And this guy's done a really good job. And I agree with you. You know, Edwards-Helaire could have a tough day, but he too does well after contact.
He does.
I think it's going to require them to. My problem is you know, if you look at, I mean, Fromm went 11 to 23, 163 yards, 1 TD through the air. It just, you know, it wasn't like he's running the ball. He was scrambling. He was negative 20 yards on 3 carries, so it was just scrambles where he got sacked. You know, when you run down the receiving statistics, DeAndre Swift was the lead receiver.
Yep.
Now, that's a good thing if you're able to have other people involved, but he's just not. And I love Fromm. He's not. Pickens was 2 for 57 at TD.
He's going to be a good one, though. He's a freshman, but he's going to be a good one. But he's not there yet.
Here's the problem, though. He could have had an awesome day, but Fromm clearly missed him.
Yep.
He sailed several over him. Blaylock's all right, but he's still freshman and young. He'll be solid. I mean, like, you know, all of them. And they didn't have Cager in this game.
Yep.
Whether he comes back or not, my biggest thing is like Fromm's act. He's better than this.
Yeah, it is.
And
it is strange. You'd expect to have seen this from 2 years ago, not this year. Yeah.
You know, here's the one thing I will say. What if, I mean, they have a cupcake this weekend, Georgia Tech. LSU has A&M. I mean, what if that Fromm we know mixed with this running game just all of a sudden comes to life, like for the SEC championship game? Then they have a serious shot.
Yeah, like I will say this. You know, it's kind of like how I talk about how do you beat the Aaron Rodgers to Tom Brady. It's you got to rush 4 guys and get to the quarterback with 4 guys so you can drop everybody back.
You're
You're not going to blitz them. It's that this is the matchup you want to have. To me, if you're going to go up against LSU, you want to be a dominant running team, as a primary, and then you want to play great defense. Check. Now,
Yep.
but your point though is if you're turning the ball over the times that you got to throw or something like that, you're going to be in for a long
I
day.
mean, if you're taking these sacks, that is a huge loss in yardage. If you're not in positive field position and putting them in negative field position most of the day, I mean, the only way to do that is get that offense rolling a little bit more. And you can't, LSU is not great on defense, and they're going to have their way, but they're not going to get it every time. And they can't run every time on LSU. I don't think anything else than them stacking. They can put their corners like Delpit out on an island.
The weather was not awesome out there.
No, this is a continued excuse.
No.
Even
I got
it,
you.
He's been under 50% on average.
I'm with you.
I'm
with you.
That's not the type of player I expect in Fromm, and especially not at this point in his career.
Fromm's got a game.
And in order for them to be able to have a shot with LSU, they've got the defense, they've got a good offensive line, one of the best in the country, and they can run the ball, but they got to be able to throw here and there.
Agree.
All right, so we're going to move on now to the Big 12, and we'll start with the TCU Horned Frogs. Travel over to Sooner territory to take on Oklahoma. It was a little bit of it was almost like the reverse of what Oklahoma went through last week, as they come from behind last week 2 weeks ago to beat Baylor, and then they squeak one by last week against Iowa State. This week, they have the 5-5 Horned Frogs come in. Gary Patterson, good defensive-minded coach. Game starts out. Oklahoma's up 14-0 right out the gate.
Yep.
Put another one on in the second. TCU answers with 10 in the second, so they go into halftime 21-10. Third quarter comes out. Each of them put a touchdown on the board. 28 to, what is that, 28-17.
17, yep.
And then TCU tries to make a comeback at the end, puts a touchdown on the fourth, but it ends up falling short as they lose 28-24. The quarterback, Max Duggan for TCU, has actually had a pretty good, I think he's a freshman, has had a pretty good year, not today. 7-21, 65 yards, no touchdowns, a pick, but he did rush the ball 12 times for 92 yards and TD. On the flip side, Jalen Hurts, 11 for 21, 145, 2 TDs, and a pick. I know Oklahoma, right now they're lined up to play Baylor in the Big 12 championship. I know that they've been getting done in terms of getting the W, but there's been a lot of close calls. That defense has definitely started to regress back to, I know they brought in this Alex Grinch guy to help that defense, but it's not what we saw at the beginning of the year in terms of run stopping and putting pressure on the quarterback. And Jalen Hurts, not just in this game with the one pick, but in the past couple, has thrown some really untimely interceptions, just not playoff and championship caliber. Things like that will cost you.
Yeah, we kind of talked about how just last week that we thought, how does Oklahoma get into the title game? Thinking that Oklahoma is probably the name, if anything's going to resurrect the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would have said, is really, really important. And we talked about it. I said, I think the Baylor-Oklahoma game has to be really close, and then Oklahoma would have to blow them out. I got to be honest with you, this game with Oklahoma, I think, took this whole conference out of the picture. I think Baylor did their part, and Oklahoma didn't. And this, again, neither one of those teams could afford a bad look. And at this point going on in the season, and like you said, Oklahoma, Hurts has kind of struggled through the air, still getting it done on the ground, but he's struggled through the air over the last couple of weeks and being efficient. And, TCU is not quite the team you want to do that against. Now,
no.
We're going to talk about Baylor in a minute, but this, to me, this makes Oklahoma look weaker, which even if Baylor overcomes it, clearly they were not in favor of the committee. So this game, it didn't show a lot. And it's not like TCU is this offensive juggernaut. Not horrible, but nonetheless, what's going on with Oklahoma and their ability to move the ball, not make mistakes? It was very sloppy. They had 3 turnovers in this game. And, let's be honest. Like, it's not like TCU was playing out of their minds. They only had 204 yards of total offense. So,
yeah, like I just said, the numbers for Duggan through the air were not that good. And, I think that you're right in the sense that the committee certainly didn't view the Big 12 with, rose-colored glasses, so to speak.
mm-hmm.
And it's really putting them on the outside looking in on this whole thing. Now, and we'll talk about the Pac-12 next, with the door opened up there, it's like, well, maybe they can squeeze back in. But I don't know. I agree with you. Like, I think they need to, because that eye test is going to come down to it, 34-31 or 42-41 over Iowa State. 28-24 over TCU. Like, they need to be dominating these teams either on the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball, or both, but they need to flex a little bit, and they're just not. So.
Well, and even more interesting, just to kind of put a bow on this, is Oklahoma was 2-1 in time of possession. 2-1. And if you only scored 28 points, you should be running the ball the whole game, and the other team shouldn't be able to score worth a lick. The other part of it is, at the same time, when only giving somebody 20 minutes, it's not like it's some quick strike offense to score 24 points. Just crazy. So, to me, this might have been the final nail in the Big 12 coffin, even before that Baylor.
Well, they don't have an easy task, and and what is this? Bedlam is what they call it.
Yeah,
and
Bedlam,
they have to
Oklahoma
go to
State.
Oklahoma State. That's not a team they're just going to trifle with. Plus, they have it's a rivalry game. Plus, they have the Chuba Hubbard, man. I mean, you get him rolling, control the game on the ground. That could spell trouble.
Tubes. Yeah, and you got Baylor's not going to really get any bonus points playing Kansas. So it's just interesting kind of setup. So
we'll move right into that game.
Let's
go Texas Longhorns, 5-5, traveled to the 9-1 Baylor Bears. Baylor fell, where were they at? Like 9? 10, 11, something like that.
Prior to this week, you got me twisted now because I know where they're at. I think they were 13, if I remember correctly. Hold on, I'm going 14. Sorry.
Texas, I think I've said the past few weeks, they were as that first ranking. I think they slid into the back end.
It was the one before last. They snuck in with a 6-3 record because that was the first time we had more than one 6-3 team. And then they lost.
And then they've tumbled since then.
Right, and I knocked out.
I just don't see it. I don't think they're that great of a team.
No, I got to say, I think this team is significantly regressed. And it was very interesting. They did, just to give you an idea where Texas is at, they did a screenshot, and they were comparing him to Mark Rule, which was kind of, they were talking about Rule and what all Rule's done with Baylor.
Matt Rule, what
I call him, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, Matt Rule. So they had shown, he took over a team that was 1-11 3 years ago. And then, you had, I forget what Texas was at, but it wasn't quite that bad, maybe like 3 or 4 wins. The next year, Texas went 10-4, and Rule's Baylor team goes 7-6. So both of them took nice jumps, look kind of equivalent. This year, you now have a Texas team that's 6-5, and Rule's out there. At what are they? 10-1, I believe. 10-1 now. So kind of interesting, and obviously, let's just talk straight resources. Baylor versus Texas. It ain't even close.
Not even
there's
close.
There's a handful of teams that can even remotely compete with Texas when it comes to dollars.
Yep.
You're talking about 4 or 5 teams that are there with them.
Yep.
So anyway, this is just kind of building up to what this game goes to, and Texas gets a lot of credit, and Baylor, coming off a loss, they didn't, that was a tough fought, game that they had. And here we go.
Yeah, I mean, they showed up. They get home. Sam Ehlinger for Texas on the day goes 22 of 37, 200 yards, no TDs and a pick. But then he rushes it 19 times for 79 yards. This is kind of the same rushing stat line as Fields. That's a lot. I don't know how that's going to hold up as things start to get dicier. But on the other hand, Charlie Brewer, 16 of 25, 221, 1 TD, no picks. Ran the ball 18 times for 75 yards in TD. They got their playmakers involved. Denzel Mims, their receiver number 5, went 7 for $125 and a TD. quite frankly, Charlie Brewer looked like what Sam Ellinger does usually. He just said, we're going to win this game. I'm going to put the team on the shoulders. Let's rock and roll. We're going. And he did it. And that's something you usually see of Ellinger. And
he was 75% of their offense. He had 300 yards between the air and the ground. And they both actually had 390 at the end of the game. To me, and remember, Brewer got knocked out. It was late in the game, but he got knocked out.
Came in.
So it was, to me, what Baylor showed is what they've kind of showed all year is that they can play defense. They can make plays when it counts. I think they've done that all year. I would even say they did that against Oklahoma in the loss. And the Longhorns, you got to start asking. Here's the problem is you've got these coaches locked into these contracts. And I don't remember if Tom Herman quite got the golden gift that Fisher got, but he got a huge chunk of change.
He got broke off. He was a hot name. He was
the hottest. He was the hottest that year. And all of a sudden, the scary part is you're seeing build-up, but you're seeing regression so quickly amongst these coaches that it's really interesting. And look, Texas, they might have all this money, but how long can they continue to float it for this?
I don't know.
Because they haven't been relevant since 2007.
Yeah, Matt Rule's done a great job. There's actually, even this week, talks about him for various other head coaching jobs of big name and even NFL gigs. I've heard his name mixed around.
I got to be honest with you. I mean, if Florida State's going to talk to somebody, this guy has proven that he's had to build the program off of a bad situation. Worse even than Florida State.
There with your offensive coordinator.
Well, here's the whole thing is
there.
I think that's the thing there. Like I said, I told you earlier, I think it's whether they're trying to decide whether they can take a wholesale change and have this recruiting year potentially go to hell. Because they said they were going to have a coach by the end of the year. Well, clock's ticking. We got a week.
Yeah. Well,
so I don't know, Matt. He's certainly somebody we're talking about because truly talk about a destroyed program. It's one thing not to have talent and all that, but he had a whole cultural issue that the university created that this guy has amazingly.
He had to give him a facelift, and he was really not anybody that was heard of to think, okay. It was almost like, okay, he was, in my mind, brought in more as a stopgap in Baylor's mind, and he turned out to be really good.
Yeah, mind you, why was he not up there with Willie Taggart? Granted, I guess that was the 1-11 year, but you know what I mean? Like, Taggart was 7-6 at Oregon. This guy was 7-6. Why was he not a hot commodity last year?
I don't know. But, I like what Baylor's doing. I actually think if they somehow find a way to get to the championship game and just absolutely destroy Oklahoma, then maybe they have a chance. I don't think it's the other way around.
I think some chips have to fall.
They do, but, they let Texas put on a field goal in the second quarter, and Texas put on a touchdown in the fourth quarter. That was it. So their defense did a really good job.
My thing is, I think it's not so much that Baylor's not good enough. It's that I think Oklahoma has devalued the stock of the Big 12.
I wouldn't disagree. It's a problem. It's a problem. So now we'll move to the Pac-12. We'll start with the Southern California rivalry as UCLA on a decent enough season. I think
started ugly.
Started ugly, looked like it was last year, and they've picked it up since then. They have shown some life. They traveled down the road to the Coliseum, take on the USC Trojans, ranked in there at, what were they, 24, I think, 25?
Last week, yep.
And we thought maybe, they're on a 5-game winning streak coming into this. They're 7-4. Bruins are 4-6. You're thinking, one of the conversations we had is they were doing the Pac-12 a favor, putting them in there. Maybe they didn't so much deserve it, but they were setting up, a good look for Oregon and Utah if they continued on their path, and that would be strong for them because Utah's loss was to USC on the road. Oregon had beaten USC on the road. Anyway,
look, let's just say USC has a shot to go to the title game.
If they win,
and Utah loses.
And Utah loses.
It doesn't help the Pac-12, but just understand that this was an afterthought team, especially after the first couple weeks. And Slovis got hurt, and he came back, took a game to get grooved in there, and he's playing. He's balling now.
Unreal game. He set the record, I think, for USC for most yards thrown in a game with 515, 37-47, 515, 4 TDs, no picks. I mean, really just
And that's impressive. Think about USC's quarterbacks that they've had. I mean, they anointed Carson Palmer, had 4 years of starting there. I mean, Matt Leinart, he beat all these guys. Teams with Reggie Bush.
Sanchez, Barkley. I mean, just guys. They've had guys.
Just phenoms, and here comes this kid.
Nobody, and, he's really, really done well. Look, they have playmakers on that team at the skill position with
their
Pittman,
receivers are stacked.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyler Vaughns, and this guy knows how to get them the ball. Because that's the thing. They've recruited some really good skill guys. St. Brown's been there. He might be a junior even. I don't know. They've recruited some really good skill guys, but you haven't. Then you don't really hear as much from them. They kind of fizzle away because they're just not involved in the game. The quarterback either isn't getting the ball to him, the plays drawn up, or ones that are conducive to them being able to get their hands on the ball and make plays. But it is now, and Slovis gets them the ball. He's not a dumb kid. For a freshman, he knows, look, my best option is make sure I get these kids the ball and not try to do too much.
Well, I think what's amazing, you think about a guy throwing for 515, you expect to see a receiver, have that one true guy that just took the top off the defense. He had 4 receivers go over 100 yards in this game. He was looking everywhere. Now, I'll tell you, Pittman was impressive with his strength. I mean, he was catching in traffic. He had 13 catches, and the least amount of the 100-yard receivers at 104 caught 2 tough touchdown passes. He is physical and nasty.
Yep, like an Anquan Bolden, man.
Yeah, so this is a team that's here's the amazing part to me, kind of going back to coaching. Was there a hotter seat after 3 weeks? The only name you heard that was automatically fired was Helton. Yep. You heard he was going to get fired, and then they made the change at the AD, and it was like he's a dead man walking. And now you got a guy that's what are they 7-4 right now?
Yeah. After that win, they go.
Or are they 8-4?
8-4.
They're 8-4,
and so, it drops UCLA to 4-7.
Yeah, but you're talking about a guy when they were talking about Taggart getting fired, they were like, well, Helton's already been fired, just nobody's told him yet. Like, that was the attitude. I got to tell you. I mean, you could say that they underperformed maybe on the year. I don't hear as much out east early on in the preseason about USC. You either hear they're good, they're bad, but you don't really get into the nitty-gritty. I can't say that I knew a lot about that. But, I mean, God, like, this guy was for dead. Yeah. And now here we are. I look at this team and I go, they got to put a defense together. But, we certainly have to see what happens.
I agree with you. It'll be an interesting situation to see how that wraps up. But, yeah, it is. He was the hottest name on the hot seat, and they've rattled it off. And now they get to sit at home. And Utah this week will travel to Colorado. Or, no, they're home, but they take on Colorado, who's, Colorado's put together a decent enough season. And they have some, wins that maybe were unexpected. So, if Utah loses, that pits Oregon and USC in the Pac-12 championship game. And again, USC's done, so they can sit home and just, watch, enjoy the Colorado-Utah game and be a big Buffs fan.
Yeah, and they're going to get a decent bowl, and I think they deserve it. I don't know that they're going to be in the New Year's Six necessarily, but. But what the New Year's Six is now is a little different than it was in the past. But it'll be interesting.
Yep. So we'll move on to the next game. And again, we said Utah, they have to go. They go home to take on Colorado for their last game. This week, they traveled to Arizona to take on the Wildcats. Not a problem. Not a problem for Tyler Hunley. Very efficient. 19-23, 211 yards, 1 TD. Did have a pick. Zach Moss, again, their running back, and there's a lot of great running backs this year.
Yep.
You got your Jonathan Taylors, you got your Chuba Hubbards, you got your J.K. Dobbins, you got your Travis Etiennes, but you got your Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you got your DeAndre Swift. But, man, don't put it past what Zach Moss is doing. 26 of 203 for 203 in a TD, but he is running like a madman. He also is 4 for 32 through the air. He's just running with absolute authority right now. When he gets his, a seam and starts going, he's moving. I mean, it's like it's like a freight train coming, and he's not huge, but he'll just run either right by you or lower a shoulder, dip a shoulder, and knock you over and just keep rolling.
He's no paperweight. He's 222. I think what I got to tell you, if what I think is going to happen based off of who's going to come out this year with the juniors, this might be by far, and Moss is definitely, he's a senior, so he's coming out, but this might be one of the best running back classes we see come out in years. I mean, mind you, there's a guy, as a Florida State fan, I'll tell you, there's a guy like Cam Akers who's not even anywhere near the top of the list, and that kid's ultra talented.
Yep.
I mean, you got J.K. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor, Etienne, all these guys could come out, and you could have an unbelievable running back class, just unbelievable. So I am excited to see what happens, with these guys and where they go. But anyway, this guy is just another one of those guys that may be a mid-round steal for somebody.
Oh, absolutely.
Just a steal.
Yeah. He could be very productive in the NFL. Look, it's to say that Utah sitting at 6 is out of the playoff picture would be, I think, just a little presumptuous, because they did look very highly with the 5 rank of Oregon and the 6 rank of Utah, and like I said, and with USC coming in the back end, it teed it up nicely. They took a huge hit with Oregon's loss, which we'll talk about next.
Yep.
But I do still think that they have the moxie to, if they show up, I don't think they'll have a problem at home with Colorado. I think that's in their favor that it's at home.
Yep.
And then in the championship game, either way. But if they get in that championship game and it is Oregon and they're able to really show up, understand this is a team that was ranked top 10 in the preseason rankings. They were just outside of that 4 ranking. There was a lot of high expectations for this team, the way they play defense, the way they run the ball, their coach.
Yep.
And they're kind of sitting right there where they need to be right now.
Yep.
So it's not out of the question, even with Oregon's loss, that if they continue to do what they need to do, that they could slip right into that 4 slot.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have a lot of chaos, and I think that let's get in the Oregon game, but we're going to wrap it up with the championships and kind of what that means as we go forward.
Sure. So let's go. My love for Oregon this year, and Cristobal, their head coach, and I love me some Justin Herbert. I still think he should be the number 1 quarterback taken overall, but that's a conversation for a different day. Oregon comes in at 5, 9-1, looking good. Arizona State on a great year, started the year out a little slow, then hit a great stride, and then have kind of hit a little skid as of late.
Yep.
They come in at 5-5.
Yeah, I think the thing is they just shut Oregon down in this game. I mean, they did. It did come back and look reasonable. There was a nice push at the end, which you like to see out of a quarterback like Herbert. Did not have one of his better days with the 2 picks, but defensively, they were shutting them down.
Ugly.
Yeah.
It was ugly defensively for Oregon too, because they seem to not have an answer for freshman Jaden Daniels, the quarterback at Arizona State. And Herbert, he went 20 of 36, 304, 2 TDs. You mentioned it, 2 picks. I mean, those 2 picks really are the difference in the game. And, he was going at the end. Johnny Johnson, their receiver, I had talked about him last week. He was at the beginning of the year. He wasn't so healthy. Number 3, 10 receptions, 277 yards, 2 TDs. At the end, when they tried to make their comeback, he could not be stopped. But it was too little, too late. And that throw at the end from Jaden Daniels to Ayuk was just on the money and was the dagger. Eno Benjamin was running really well. They had a good game plan.
Yep.
They couldn't stop the run game in Eno Benjamin. Oregon couldn't, and they couldn't stop Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk was 7 for $161 in a TD. Benjamin on the ground was 31 for $114.
Yep.
They couldn't stop him, and that was essentially what cost them.
Well, I think what happened is they started to come back, and it started to get closer at the end. really watching Daniel just answer. Like at a time when it didn't look like it was going to go well, it looked like Oregon was going to mount this comeback, and then and when he answered big. We're not talking about little dink and dunk.
Well, you're talking about, and I'm sure a lot of NFL scouts and eyes were on this game, if not there, but here's this true freshman, Jaden Daniels, that pretty much was like, I'm like, all the talks about Justin Herbert in this game, like, I don't care about that guy. Let me show you what I can do. This kid's going to be good, man. I mean, he's going to be good. He's got, you need to put a little meat on the bones, but he's big, he's tall, he throws a great deep ball. I haven't watched a ton of him this year, but his accuracy isn't awful by any means. He definitely threw a couple passes that had some touch on him. And he's not a runner, but he's tall enough that if he needs to move, he can squirt out there. Yeah, I like what Herm Edwards is doing, man. I mean, it was a very impressive win, and not that this was probably the one that left that you on the day that you would worry about as potential upset. Maybe A&M Georgia.
Yep.
And it held serve. I'm very surprised. I'm actually very disappointed in Oregon. You have everything in front of you. And hats off to Arizona State for getting it done, but this shouldn't have happened. And, again, I talk a lot about Herbert. I love the guy, but those 2 picks cost you the game, essentially.
Yep.
Granted, hats off to him trying to make the comeback, and it was some magnificent 2-minute drill type play, but it was too little too late.
Yep.
And I understand your D didn't help you, but you can't, in a game like this at this time of the year, and you already held out from going to the NFL 1 year for one more year in college, and great. I'm glad you did it. I think your draft stock is even better this year than it would have been last year, but this is the game you have to perform in, and you didn't.
Absolutely. Here's the thing, and now we're going to get down to the championship because it'll kind of roll back into this. And let's talk about the Pac-12. We already mentioned it. Oregon's earmarked to get in. They were in already. And that's kind of the problem is you get into games like this, and it's like, what are you playing for? And this is kind of where the rubber meets the road a little bit. Oregon came out flat, and Arizona State is playing for respectability. They're playing to get their youth some experience in some tough games, and they showed up, and it was great. On the other end, Utah, like I said, Utah's got to win out. USC's got to watch from the sidelines and hope Utah stumbles and then they could get in. Right now, Utah is probably the one player in the Pac-12. So as it stands right now, the championship games, there's 3 slots of the Big 5 that are not decided right now. So as we mentioned, Pac-12, you got Oregon, and it's Utah winning they're in, lose, and USC gets the nod. We'll go over to the ACC. The ACC, Clemson was idle before they take on their rival South Carolina. It's a big game, but Clemson is pretty much a win and in the playoffs from that standpoint if they win their championship game. Will go and play against either Virginia Tech or Virginia. They're going to play this weekend, and winner takes the crown for the Coastal and gets a shot at Clemson. Virginia Tech's playing a lot better football right now. Virginia still has some ponies left there. I give them some credit. They lost their best corner and still managed to hang in there this year. Coastal, unfortunately, has not performed as well as we'd like over the last few years. Expectations will be that Clemson will roll through the rest of their schedule. But, again, these teams are good enough. Not, rivalry with South Carolina. South Carolina's having one of their worst years. But it's a rivalry, and it's a big rivalry. You can't sleep on it. It's in Columbia, right?
Yeah, we have to go there, man. And they may try to they may have a sniper try to take Trevor out.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know. It's nasty. Like, that's the thing you always got to worry about is some of these rivalries can get real nasty. That rivalry in particular can be kind of nasty. Usually when it's, ACC's got a couple of rivalries that are ACC versus SEC, and that's one of them. So that one will be interesting. Then in the Big Ten, we talked about Ohio State, regardless of how they do against Michigan, obviously still a huge game for them because they need to keep that undefeated hope alive, but they will get a chance at the title game. They're going to play the winner of the Minnesota-Wisconsin game, so another win and you're in. Wisconsin, if they win, will be in with 2 losses. Minnesota, if they win, will be 1 loss. We mentioned already the Big 12 is decided. OU and Baylor are going to play each other regardless. Neither one of them can afford to stumble. Well, actually, really, OU's out of it. Well, no, I'm sorry, they're not. They won.
They're still
They're
in it.
still in it, but they can't stumble. They got a tough game against Oklahoma State. And Baylor plays, I think, Kansas. So
Kansas, yeah.
so their game is
a resurging Kansas
yeah.
team, but still it's Kansas,
Yeah.
and the way Baylor's rolling shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, but you can't put that last game of the season on. And then finally in the SEC, regardless of the end of the year, now LSU gets A&M, which gave UGA a lot to handle last week, but they've got 4 losses already on the year. Expectations are that LSU can continue, but they better play some defense.
Yeah,
and
it
then,
is 7:00 at Death Valley, so that's going to be tough. And like I said earlier, I don't think LSU will have a problem winning this game, just because I don't think that. I think the run game from Clyde Edwards-Helaire and LSU will be what really bites Texas A&M in the behind, but they'll be able to score points on that defense.
Yeah.
I anticipate A&M to put points on the board, and it just depends on how many points LSU can score to beat them.
Yeah, and you got UGA, who is locked in already.
They have
got Georgia Tech, which is the bottom of the ACC. That's a game Georgia not only should win but should roll. So here's kind of the thing we got to look at. If all plays out according to plan, let's just say Minnesota beats Wisconsin and gets in. You've got a no loss versus a 1-loss team there. You've got in Clemson, expectations would be that they finish out their schedule undefeated, head to the playoffs. Clemson, we know the ACC's weakness, so Clemson can't afford to lose, or else there's nobody coming from the ACC.
We win against South Carolina. We win the championship game, we'll be in there.
Yeah, but if Clemson stumbles on either of those games, that's out for the ACC.
Yep.
And then you got, the Big 12 is probably on the outside looking in, but realistically, you're going to have a 1-loss team coming out of that with a championship. Then you go to the Oregon versus Utah. The key here is Utah running the table, and then they'd have a shot, and then UGA LSU. So here's what you could have if all this plays out according to plan. You have undefeated Clemson potentially. What happens if Minnesota beats Ohio State? That's one thing. And now you'd have 2 1-loss teams in the Big Ten. You'd have Minnesota being the champ. If Baylor wins, you're going to have a 1-loss team there, or OU. Either way, you'll have a 1-loss team there. If Utah does their business, they're a 1-loss team. Then you could have, if UGA beats LSU, you could have 2 1-loss teams in the SEC plus Alabama at 1 loss. You're going to have, at a minimum, or at a maximum on this end, probably what is that, 7 1-loss team potential, with Clemson could be the only undefeated team when it's all said and done. The one undefeated team everybody's hated forever. Oh, I hope so.
But yeah, Minnesota obviously has to take care of Wisconsin this weekend, and Ohio State has to take care of Michigan. But yeah, it's a very possible solution the way this year has gone. Not solution, but possible scenario. The way this season has gone, who knows what could happen. My biggest concern is if you have that, then they're going to start to, the conversation will be,
it's coming.
Clemson at the undefeated, even though they're undefeated, the ACC is so bad that maybe they don't need to be there.
Oh, I don't think you're going to be able to argue a hell of a lot of that, to be honest with you.
What do you think's coming?
Here's the one thing I think will happen is the scenario I played out is most likely, minus the OSU Minnesota. Okay, so Ohio State could be undefeated, but my point is something's going to happen this weekend, and probably something's going to happen the next weekend that's going to throw all of that into chaos. What I just said, and that's the best case scenario, is having all those 1-loss teams. I think this is going to play out. I think the committee is going to get ugly. There's going to be a lot of jockeying for, what it is. Now, here's what's going to come into play is 1 loss less valuable if you're not a conference winner? Because here's the problem is, so say you get
Here's what I think is going to end up happening. I think that if we win out, Ohio State wins out. Let's say Utah loses to Oregon and LSU wins out. I think Bama's back in.
Yeah, but okay, well, if Bama's back in, though, but here's what happens. So, what if UGA beats LSU? Then you got 2 1-loss teams.
Then that's different. But in the scenario I'm laying out, if Clemson wins out, Ohio State wins out, Oregon beats Utah in the Pac-12 championship,
So if you think there's 3 undefeated teams, which would be LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson, you think Alabama's the 4th team.
Yeah. Yep.
So over the Big 12,
over the Big 12 champ. Now
And
that's
o-
where
and-
the
and
Big
over-
12
and
champ
over-
could maybe
what if
slide in if Baylor.
What about Utah winning though? What if Utah wins out?
Well, that's different. I think Utah has, if they're going to end winning the Pac-12, then it's going to be a toss-up. It's not as much of a guarantee as I thought it was before Oregon's loss. But if they do win out Utah, like I said, preseason ranked high, there was a lot of expectations. I think that they are good enough that they could, as the Pac-12 champs, still get an edge over Alabama.
Interesting. I go back to the
SEC love, baby.
It is, but
SEC love. Let's not be blind to it. I don't want to be naive to the fact that that it's a real thing.
No, I agree. And listen, you can't just say it's all love. I mean, the teams and the way they've performed. But I guess there is an argument for and against every one-loss team that could potentially come out of this. So it'll be interesting. I mean, because you can go back and you can say all you want about Alabama. They're a very good team. On one aspect, you can just say it. The eye test tells you they're a very good team. I'm not saying they're one of the top 4, but on the same vein, you can say this Alabama team only beat one team in the top, or only played one team in the top 25 and lost.
They'll play Auburn this weekend, and that'll hopefully tell us a lot more.
But even if they beat Auburn, I mean, does Auburn hang at the bottom? Probably with 4 losses, even still, they probably hang at the bottom. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. There'll be a lot of people arguing. It ain't
over yet.
No.
It ain't over.
And it'll come down to bias. That'll be a big argument. Why is there all this bias?
Yep.
Why is there all this bias? I mean, you could have crazy things happen. OSU could lose to Michigan. Wisconsin could win the Big 12 or Big 10. Sorry, Big 10. I mean, imagine that. And I mean, you're talking. What if they win the Big 10 and OSU is only a 1-loss team?
Oh, then
but plays in the title game.
Yeah,
but loses. Is Alabama better than that? Because most people have said.
So. I think that will bounce Alabama.
Do you? Because again, there's going to be a lot. The whole thing is this is what it's all built around. This is why we get on the mic and talk about college football like this. It's going to get ugly. I feel for the committee, but I think they made their bet a little bit in my mind, going all the way back to the first ranking, in the fact that there was no consistent logic that I saw. Just the logic, because you could say their logic's wrong, fine, but it wasn't consistent logic. Like, you could see where they put people in there because of strength of schedule, but at other times it was that they were undefeated.
It wasn't equal for another team.
Yeah, it was this, it was that, and it just seemed like the bounce around. So the one thing I'm confident of is that not everything will play out like it's quote unquote supposed to. That's the only thing I know. This week we'll do some damage to somebody. Next week we'll do some damage to somebody.
Rivalry weekends, you throw the records out, man. You really do. Yep. I know you don't. It might not sound normal, but we need to beat the Cox.
Yeah.
Oh, as bad as they are, that's a big game for us, and that we can get had if we're not careful.
That's probably the biggest chaos that could happen, would be knocking a team like Clemson out, because it just adds one more one-loss team to the mix.
Yep. So that's it. We're going to go ahead and get this wrapped up. The rankings, the latest official college football playoff rankings will be revealed tomorrow night on Tuesday, and then we'll hop back on the mics, talk about a preview of Week 14, rivalry weekend, and the last regular season weekend of college football. And we'll also talk a little bit about those rankings in the playoff picture. So we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you as always next time on the Gridiron. Have a lovely day.